Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced with a video for Ask a Libertarian. And in this video, what I want to talk about is why prohibition is a bad thing and why it's generally a bad policy. Now, there are all things that people can think of that they don't want happening, whether it's provision of a particular good or particular service or just things they don't want people doing. But the problem is just telling people not to do something, creating a law saying you can provide X good, whether it be drugs or X service, whether it be basically like sex work or anything, doesn't necessarily make it go away. It doesn't necessarily eliminate the problem because the demand is still there. But what you do is you make the problem worse. Because when you cannot legally provide a good or a service, then it is pushed into the black market or the shadow market, whatever you want to call it. And essentially what happens here is that you have people who are going to be enterprising actors, but these are actors who don't have a problem operating outside of the traditional legal system, which means they're going to be willing to do other things that are not necessarily legal, whether it's practice unethical sales tactics, use guns in order to enforce contracts, since they don't have the use of a traditional legal system to enforce their arrangements with others. So you're basically pushing people to get these goods and services from a more violent actor. And on top of it, you make things worse. So let's focus on, let's say, drug use for a moment. And let's take a look at the most harshest drugs, like heroin and stuff like that. So what happens is that when you're going to an illegal heroin dealer, there's a bigger chance that you're not getting necessarily a pure heroin. You're going to get some heroin that's laced with some other type of substance, which makes it more likely that you will overdose. So you actually make the overdosing problem worse because people are overdosing on impure drugs because there is no accountability in the shadow market. There's just no one. When you have a more legitimate business, what would happen is that if someone sold something and it wasn't what they told you they were selling, you'd be able to basically sue them. There'd be legal actions you can take that would put them out of business and put bad actors, out of the market. On top of that, you make the addiction worse because what happens is people always say, things like marijuana are a gateway drug. They're not a gateway drug because suddenly people just want a bigger high. Become gateway drugs because you're forcing people to have to go to illegal gun dealers. I mean, not illegal gun dealers, illegal drug dealers. And these illegal drug dealers are going to be like, hey, you're buying pot? Let me see if I can get you hooked on a harder substance, a more addictive substance, because black market salespeople are going to have a lot less ethical method of sales. Again, they're black market dealers. They're not doing this because they're necessarily ethical, law-abiding citizens. And you're forcing them to deal with criminals. And this creates turf wars and organized crime. And that creates violence in the streets. So you're creating violence in the streets. You're making addiction worse. You're making it more likely that people will get addicted to harder drugs in the case of drugs. And on top of it, a lot of that money that comes from that goes into the black market goes to not only organized crime in your neighborhood as far as street gangs, but it goes to organized crime in the form of cartels that create all sorts of instability in Central American and South American countries, or to terrorist organizations that are causing instability in the Middle East. You are funding things that actually violate national security because you're pushing these goods and services into the black market instead of having a legal provision of them where all these things would become sort of less, you would reduce the harm. Okay, there's no way you're going to necessarily you can say, hey, I don't want drugs anymore and make a law that says no drugs, but that doesn't mean drugs are going to go away. But what you have done is you've increased the harm of drug abuse. But legalization should reduce the harm of drug abuse for the many reasons that I pointed out, because you get rid of those effects. So that's part of the reason, and you can apply the same logic to sex work or any other type of good or service that is currently subject to a policy of prohibition. It only makes harm worse, not less. So you can reduce harm, not eliminate it. You'll never eliminate harm, but you can reduce harm through legalization. And it may not necessarily reduce harm to drastic measures in the short run. Again, it takes time for changes to happen. but at least you'll reduce harm over time. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Have a great day and enjoy this video for Ask a Libertarian.